I want to start by telling you something that the official reports won't. They won't tell you about the mud on her shoes. They won't tell you about the way the rain made her hair stick flat against her neck. They won't tell you about the sound she was making, not loud crying, not the dramatic kind you see in films, just that quiet, steady, awful kind of crying that sounds like someone trying very hard not to drown in something invisible. The official report will tell you coordinates. It will tell you the atmospheric conditions of Sector Vale 9 on the night of day 211. It will list the presence of 12 Galactic Union soldiers, 3 automated sentry drones, 1 registered civilian, and 1 unregistered entity classified at the time as anomalous biological presence of unknown origin. None of that tells you anything real. What was real was the woman. Her name was Lena Vasic. She was 23 years old. She was, by every measurable standard the Galactic Union uses to assess human worth, and they do assess human worth, don't let anyone tell you they don't, she was nobody. No citizenship tier above baseline, no augmentation markers, no trade guild registration, no military affiliation. She worked 4 shifts a week at a recycling compression station in the lower districts of Vale, human settlement grid, sorting material that the automated systems deemed ambiguous, which mostly meant she sorted garbage, by hand, in gloves that didn't fit right because the union supply chains never quite got human hand sizes correct, and nobody ever bothered to fix that. She was, in every way the systems of the year 3247 recognized, unremarkable. I want you to hold that in your mind, unremarkable, because what happened that night at Cemetery Node 7, what she somehow walked into the center of without any preparation, without any warning, without any weapons or augmentation or backup, will make you rethink what unremarkable even means. I was stationed at Node 7 that night, as part of a routine perimeter assignment. Let me be clear about what Cemetery Node 7 is, because the name makes it sound more peaceful than it is. It's not really a cemetery in the old Earth sense. It's a designated interspecies memorial site, one of 37 across the Galactic Union's occupied territories, where the remains or markers of significant non-human entities are preserved under Treaty Protocol 14. Most of them are empty tombs, symbolic. The Union keeps them lit with low-frequency preservation fields and guarded 24 hours because damaging or defiling a protected memorial site is one of the fastest ways to start a war with one of the 9 allied species. We had 12 soldiers that night, me and 11 others spread across the perimeter, standard rotation. Nobody expected anything to happen. Nobody ever expects anything to happen at Node 7. The tombs sit behind atmospheric shielding. The access gates are biometrically locked. The whole area is surveilled by satellite overhead. It's the kind of posting where you mostly stand around and think about whether the meal rations back at base have been restocked yet. Private Comret was the first one to see her. He told me later that he almost didn't report it. He said she looked like a maintenance worker at first, the gray recycling station coveralls, the way she moved, a little hunched against the rain like someone used to walking with their head down. He thought maybe she had a work order. Maybe one of the atmospheric conduits near the outer wall needed servicing. Then he saw her face. She was crying, he told me, like she'd been crying before she even got there. Like she brought the crying with her. He keyed his comm and let Sergeant Adrav Vaughn know there was an unauthorized civilian near the perimeter. Vaughn pulled up the access logs, confirmed no clearance for any civilian entry, and dispatched 2 soldiers to intercept. By the time I got visual on her, Lena Vasic had already passed the outer sensor ring. I still don't know how she did that. The sensor ring at Node 7 is calibrated to detect any biological mass above 30 kilograms. She was clearly well above that threshold. The investigation team later reviewed the sensor logs and found nothing. No gap in coverage. No malfunction. No override. Just a 2-minute window where the logs show the sensors were active and functioning, and somehow registered nothing where she was standing. The investigation team wrote it up as calibration anomaly and moved on. I don't believe that. I never did. She was standing at the far end of the northern Memorial Row when I first saw her clearly. The northern row is where the oldest tombs are, the ones from before the Union's current iteration, before the Third Compact, before the Species Alliance treaties were formalized. The ones from the early contact era, when things were stranger and more violent, and the boundaries between human space and non-human space were still being drawn in blood and fire. The tomb she was standing in front of was the one at the very end. The one we were specifically instructed never to touch, never to let civilians near, and never, this was in our briefing, in writing, emphasized twice, never to discuss the identity of the interred with any unauthorized personnel. We just called it Tomb Omega, because it was last on the row, and because whoever named things in the Union's administrative system liked Greek letters. The official records say Tomb Omega contains the remains of a significant entity from the pre-compact era whose identity is classified under Diplomatic Seal 7. That's all. No species listed. No name. No dates. Just a black stone marker about 2 meters tall with a single symbol carved into it, a circle with a crescent cut through the lower half, like a moon that something had taken a bite out of. The tomb itself is sealed under a preservation field that runs 3 layers deep. Physical barrier, electromagnetic barrier, and a third layer that the technical briefing described as resonance-based, and that nobody in my unit had ever fully understood. The flowers on the grave were real. That's the thing that hit me first when I got close enough to see clearly. The flowers on the grave, and there were flowers, sitting at the base of the marker in a small, careful arrangement, were real. Not synthetic, not printed. Real flowers with soil still on the roots, the kind you'd have to actually grow or find somewhere that growing things were permitted. In Sector Vale 9, growing things required a cultivation permit. Those were tiered to citizenship class. Baseline humans could apply for one, but the approval waiting list was approximately 11 months. She had real flowers. I noted that and didn't know what to do with it. Corporal Desna Fitch reached her first. I watched from about 30 meters back, hand on my sidearm, not drawn, just resting there, while Fitch walked up to the woman slowly, the way you approach someone who might be in distress and you're not sure if they know you're there. The woman knew. She didn't turn around, but her shoulders changed. The way a person's shoulders change when they feel a presence behind them and they're deciding whether to be afraid. "Ma'am," Fitch said. Her voice was calm. She was good at calm. "This is a restricted area. I'm going to need to see your clearance documentation." The woman didn't respond right away. Rain came down on the memorial stones. The preservation field around the tombs made a low hum that you felt more in your teeth than heard with your ears. Somewhere overhead, one of the sentry drones circled slowly, its scan light sweeping a pale blue arc across the wet ground. "I don't have any," the woman said. Her voice was quiet, rough from crying. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step away from the tomb and come with me too." I just needed a minute. She finally turned, and I could see her face then, not young the way advertising makes young look, but young the way real people are young, tired around the eyes, the kind of tired you carry for years. Her cheeks were wet and it wasn't all rain. "I'm sorry. I know I'm not supposed to be here. I found something, and I didn't know where else to go." Fitch paused. "What did you find?" The woman reached into the pocket of her coveralls and took out something small. She held it out toward Fitch in an open palm. Even from 30 meters, I could see it catching the light in a way that didn't match the surrounding darkness. A cold, silver-blue light, very faint, very steady. Fitch reached for her comm. I heard her say, voice very controlled, "Sergeant Vaughn, I need you at Tomb Omega now." and tell the lieutenant what Lena Vasic had found. And she told us later that she found it in the recycling stream at the compression station, tangled in a batch of recovered material from a demolition site in the old city, was a locket. Or something that functioned like a locket. It was about the size of a thumb joint, dark metal, perfectly smooth on the outside, and it had that faint silver-blue luminescence that did not dim and did not flicker, and did not respond to any interference the technical team threw at it. When Lieutenant Kara Shen finally arrived and looked at it, she didn't touch it. She stood back about a meter and just looked at it for a long moment, and then she said, very quietly, "Nobody touched that." Nobody did. "Where did you find it?" she asked Lena. Lena explained. The recycling station. The demolition material. She'd almost put it through the compression intake and then stopped because it caught the light differently from everything else. She'd been carrying it in her pocket for 3 days, she said, trying to figure out what to do with it. Nobody she showed it to recognized it. She'd tried running it through the public information terminals and got nothing. "And then you brought it here," Shen said, "to this specific tomb." Lena looked at her. Something crossed her face, a kind of helpless confusion, almost embarrassed. "I dreamed about it," she said. "I know how that sounds. I dreamed about this place, about this tomb. I've never been here before in my life, and I dreamed about it for 3 nights. Standing right here." She gestured at the ground where she was standing. "And then I woke up and I looked up where this place was on the grid, and I came. I don't know why, I just came." The rain got heavier. Vaughn and Shen exchanged a look. The kind of look that field officers exchange when something is happening that their training didn't prepare them for, and they know it. "Okay," Shen said. "I need you to stay right where you are. Don't put the locket away. Just hold it where I can see it." She stepped away to make a call. I was close enough to hear fragments. Phrases like possible pre-compact artifact, an unknown luminescent signature, and civilian discoverer, baseline tier, no augmentation, and then after a pause, quieter. I know what tomb it is. That's why I'm calling you." What came next took about 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes felt longer. We stood in the rain around Lena Vasic and the locket and Tomb Omega, and nobody talked much. Lena stood very still. She'd stopped crying, at least outwardly, though her eyes still had that raw, washed look. She looked at the tomb sometimes and then looked away. Once she said, quietly and to nobody in particular, "She was someone important, wasn't she? Whoever's in there." Nobody answered. Comrade, standing next to me, shifted his weight from foot to foot. He leaned toward me slightly and said, barely above a whisper, "The artifact. You see how it's getting brighter." I looked. He was right. The locket in Lena's hand was, very gradually, glowing more intensely. Not alarmingly, not the kind of escalation that makes you want to run. More like the way a coal glows when you blow on it. A deepening, a waking up. And then the preservation field around Tomb Omega made a sound it had never made before. I know because I'd been stationed at Node 7 enough times to know exactly what the field sounded like at every hour of the day in every weather condition. I knew its frequencies the way you know a familiar voice. And that sound it made, a low, resonant pulse, almost like a breath drawn in, was not in any of those frequencies. It was new. It lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then everything went quiet in a way that didn't feel like quiet. It felt like the pause before something. I have tried in the years since day 211 to describe what happened next in language that doesn't sound like I've lost my mind. I haven't fully succeeded. He was there and then he wasn't and then he was there. That's the closest I can get to accurate. There was no moment I can point to where he arrived. There was no sound of approach. No visual transition from absence to presence. One moment the space beside Tomb Omega was empty, and then it wasn't. He was tall. That's what my brain registered first, the pure physical information before anything else could process. Tall. in the way that made you recalculate the scale of the surrounding space, like when you see a building that photographs haven't prepared you for the actual size of. He wore dark clothing, close-fitting, layered, with a high collar and long sleeves that covered everything below his jaw and above his hands, every seam precise, no insignia. His face was, I want to be careful here because I've been asked about this in 3 separate debriefs, and I've given 3 versions that all sound inadequate. His face was pale, not ill pale, not death pale exactly, though you'd reach for that word. Just outside the range of human coloration in a way that made you aware of it without being able to explain why. Strong features, dark eyes that reflected the preservation field's glow in a way that human eyes don't reflect light. An expression that I can only describe as controlled grief. The face of someone who has felt the same thing for so long that it has carved itself into the resting arrangement of their features. He was looking at the tomb. Then he was looking at Lena. 12 armed soldiers in that graveyard, and not one of us moved. Not one of us spoke. Not one of us reached for a weapon. I have thought about that many times since, about the stillness that came over us. I don't think it was fear exactly. Fear makes you want to move backward, usually. This was different. This was more like the stillness you feel in a very old building or at the edge of a very large body of water. Like being in the presence of something that was old before the things you think of as old had begun. His voice was quiet, and it carried anyway. That's my queen's tomb. The words fell into the rain-soaked air of Cemetery Node 7, with a weight that had no equivalent in any physical measurement I know. He had not moved. He was still looking at Lena. His dark eyes were on her face with an attention that was not aggressive and was not threatening and was, somehow, more intense than either. Who are you? Part 2. What the archive remembers. Before I tell you what happened after that, what she said, what he did, what it meant, what the next 47 minutes in Cemetery Node 7 cost every person present in ways we are still calculating, I have to tell you something about the tomb. Because the tomb is the beginning of the story. The tomb is older than almost everything else in Sector Vale 9, older than the Union's occupation of this sector, older than the Third Compact, older than the Species Alliance, older than most of the things humans have built here and are proud of. What I'm about to tell you comes from 2 sources. The first is what I was able to access in the days after day 211, when the incident triggered an automatic declassification review of adjacent historical materials at classification level 4. Bureaucratic systems sometimes work in your favor accidentally, and a lot of sealed archive material became temporarily visible to field agents in the review scramble. The second source is him, what he told Lena, what Lena told us after. I'll combine them because they match. Imperfectly and from different angles, but they match. Her name was Sarathis. Not a human name, and she wasn't human, not by the biological classification systems the Union uses, but she had lived among humans for a long time. Long enough that the name was recorded in human scripts in 12 separate historical documents across 4 different planetary archives, which is how the archive team found the matches once they knew what to look for. She was, the records use careful language here, because the Union's historical documentation is cautious about the older species classifications that predate the Compact's official taxonomy. She was of the Velhari, a word that doesn't translate cleanly into any human language currently in common use. The closest approximation that the Compact's linguistic database offers is something like those who persist beyond the organic cycle, which is a very bureaucratic way of saying something much older and stranger. The humans of the pre-Compact era had other words, shorter ones, starker ones, the kind of words that get carved into warnings rather than historical documents. She had come to Sector Vale 9 in a time before it was called Sector Vale 9, when it was called, in the records of the people who lived there then, simply the outer reach. When human settlement here was sparse and hard, and the nights lasted 16 hours, and the sky had a different color because the atmospheric processors hadn't been running long enough to finish the job. She had come, the records suggest, because of him. Because she followed him, or he followed her. The records disagree on the direction, which probably means it went both ways and back again over a very long time. What they agree on is that they were together, that they were old together, in the way that entities become old together when they have both survived long enough to become rare. When the things that shaped them are gone, and they have only each other as witnesses to who they were before the world changed. And she died. That is not in any of the official records I accessed. That is what he told Lena, in the graveyard in the rain, in language that she struggled later to translate, because some of it wasn't in a language she recognized, and yet she understood it anyway. He said, she died protecting something that didn't deserve her death. He said, the ones who killed her are gone now, their civilization dust, their names erased. He said, he built her tomb here because this sector was where they had been happy, and happiness leaves a mark on a place if you let it, if you pay attention to the ground beneath your feet and the air you breathe together over years, and he wanted her to rest somewhere marked by happiness rather than by the war that took her. He said he has not left this sector since. In 3,000 years, or whatever the figure actually is, the archive team is still arguing about the timeline. He has not left. He has watched the humans arrive. He has watched the Union establish itself. He has watched the treaties and the compacts and the administrative structures and the designation of the sector and the installation of the memorial node and the tomb's classification under Diplomatic Seal 7. He didn't object to any of it. He only had one requirement, and it was that the tomb was not touched and not disturbed, and that whatever was inside it, which is classified, which I was never told, and which I no longer ask about, remained intact. The Union, presumably, found this arrangement preferable to the alternative. And so Cemetery Node 7, 12 soldiers, atmospheric shielding, Diplomatic Seal 7. And Lena Vasic, standing in the rain with a locket in her hand that she found in the recycling stream. The locket was Sarathas's. He told Lena this the way you say something you have long since stopped being surprised by, not flatly, but with that specific texture of old pain that has been pressed so many times it no longer bleeds fresh, just aches. He said he had given it to her before the war began. He said it was made from a material that doesn't exist in the Union's current material registry, because the civilization that made it dissolved 3,000 years ago. He said it should have been in the tomb with her, and it wasn't, and for a very long time he had assumed it was simply lost, destroyed in the battle, dissolved in time, gone. He did not look away from Lena's face while he said any of this. That was the thing about him that I kept coming back to. Every person in that graveyard, every armed, augmented, trained soldier, was acutely aware of him, watching him the way you watch something you don't fully understand and want very much not to provoke. And he was paying attention to exactly one person, the young woman in the recycling coveralls with the mud on her shoes and the raw eyes. "How did you find it?" he asked her. "I work at a compression station," she said. I want to give her full credit for this, she had kept her voice steady. Not entirely steady, but the kind of steady that takes effort. That's a choice you make and keep making every few seconds. Recycling. A demolition batch came in from the old city, the buildings they're clearing for the new transit grid. It was in the batch. Something shifted in his face. The controlled grief deepened for just a moment. "The old city," he said. "The lowest districts, the ones that have been sealed since before the Union's occupation." "Yes," he said, and then very quietly, "she went there at the end. I knew she had gone somewhere and I could not find her in time and I did not know where, the old city." He was quiet for a moment. "She went home." Lena's grip on the locket shifted slightly. I noticed her knuckles. She was holding it tighter. "I'm sorry," she said. That was it. 2 words. The simplest possible human response to a grief that was 3,000 years old and standing 6 feet in front of her. He looked at her. The rain came down. "Why are you sorry?" he asked, not hostile. Genuinely curious, like the question was something he actually wanted to understand. "Because you've been carrying this a long time," Lena said, "and I don't think anyone said that to you in a while. I will tell you something I am not sure I should admit in an official account." When she said that, when Lena Vasic, 23 years old, recycling station worker, no augmentation, baseline citizenship tier, said those 2 sentences to a 3,000-year-old Velhari entity in the rain outside a classified memorial tomb, I felt something shift. Not physically, not in any way I could measure. But something in the air of Cemetery Node 7 changed quality, like when a room full of held breath suddenly releases, like when a pressure you've stopped noticing lifts. I looked at Sergeant Vaughn. She was looking at me. Her expression was the same as mine felt, not confused exactly, because what was happening wasn't confusing. It was too clear for confusion. It was strange, but it was legible, the way some things are legible even when you've never seen them before. Something was happening here that mattered. Something was happening here that was older and larger than the 12 of us and our perimeter assignment, and our weapons, and our training, and our allegiance to the Galactic Union's protocols. I put my hand at my side. Not on my sidearm, just at my side. He said, "You brought this here." Not a question. "Yes," Lena said. Through the sensor ring. Yes, I don't know how, I just walked." He looked at her for a long time. Longer than is comfortable by human social standards. But he wasn't human, and the discomfort didn't seem to occur to him as a concern. He was doing something with that attention, running some kind of assessment that had nothing to do with any augmentation scan we could detect with our equipment. "The locket recognizes you," he said finally. Lena blinked. "It's an object." "It's a Velhari object. It was made from resonance-bonded material. It responds to," he paused, and something in that pause felt like choosing a word from a very large vocabulary and settling for something inadequate, affinity. "It cannot be carried by just anyone. It cannot pass through shielding by just anyone. If you brought it through the perimeter field, it chose to let you carry it." He paused again. "She chose to let you carry it." The air went very still. Lena looked down at the locket in her hand. Then she looked up at him. "What does that mean?" she asked. "I don't know," he said. "I haven't seen anything like it in 3,000 years. Part 3. The Weight of Recognition. I've been asked in every debrief since day 211 whether what happened next constitutes a security threat. I have said every time, I don't know how to answer that. Because what happened next was not an attack. It was not an incursion. It was not any of the things our protocols were designed to handle. It was something that the protocols have no category for, which is the thing about it that still keeps some of the people who were there awake at night. He asked to enter the tomb. He looked at Lieutenant Shen, which was interesting, because out of the 12 of us he had somehow correctly identified the ranking officer without being told, and he said, simply and without aggression, "I would like to open the tomb. I need to verify something. I will not remove anything. I will not damage anything. I will remain visible to all of you throughout." Shen's face didn't change. She was very good at keeping her face professional under conditions that were not professionally manageable. "This site is under Diplomatic Seal 7, she said. "I don't have the clearance to grant access." "I know," he said. "The seal is mine. I agreed to it as a condition of the site's protection under Treaty Protocol 14. I can revoke it." He paused. "I'm asking your permission as a courtesy." "I am not required to ask." Shen processed that. She looked at me. I had nothing useful to offer. I looked at Vaughn. Vaughn had nothing useful to offer. We were all doing the thing where you hope someone else in the group has the answer, and when you realize they don't, you have to make a decision with incomplete information. Okay, Shen said, open it. The preservation field responded to him, the way it had responded to nothing else in the time I'd been stationed at Node 7. It didn't switch off. It shifted, like a door that knows the person on the other side. The 3 layers of barrier moved the way water moves when you put your hand into it, yielding, adapting, letting him through without force, without override, without any of the technical drama you'd expect from dismantling security that deep. He walked to the tomb. He stood there with one hand resting on the black stone marker, not gripping it, not pressing against it, just resting, the way you rest your hand on something you have touched 10,000 times before, and the touching is itself the thing, the contact, the proof of presence. He stood like that for about 30 seconds. Nobody spoke. Then he reached out and touched the carving on the marker, the moon with the crescent cut through it, and something inside the tomb made the same sound the preservation field had made earlier. That breath-in sound. And then, very slowly, a seam appeared in the face of the black stone. Not a door exactly, more like a parting, like the stone was choosing to become 2 things instead of 1. Inside the tomb, there was light. Not the preservation field's cold, functional glow. Something warmer. Something the color of early morning in places where there are still trees, and the sun comes up slow, and the light changes for half an hour before it commits to day. I don't know what was in the tomb. I want to be honest about that. I was positioned at the right angle to see the opening clearly, and I looked, and what I saw was the light, and what I saw were shapes, arrangements of things that my brain could not immediately resolve into categories. And then he was inside, and his body was blocking most of the view, and I was aware that I was looking at something I probably wasn't meant to see, and I looked away. Some of the others didn't look away. Comrade told me afterward that he saw something like a figure. He said lying down, like sleeping, and then he said he didn't want to talk about it anymore, and he didn't, not to me. Fitch said she saw objects, arranged carefully. She said it looked like someone had put things in there that mattered, not randomly, not casually, but with intention. The way you arrange things around someone when you want them to know, even in whatever is after, that someone thought about what they'd want. He came out of the tomb holding the locket. Not the one from Lena's hand. The one from the tomb, because there were 2, which he explained in the way that someone explains something they've been waiting to explain for a very long time and hadn't known until now that anyone would ever ask. The locket Lena had found was 1/2 of a matched pair. The pair had been separated. He and Saratha's had each worn one. His had gone into the tomb with her. Hers had gone with her when she went to the old city and apparently had been there, buried in the rubble of a civilization that no longer existed for 3,000 years. Until a demolition crew tore through the old city to make way for a transit grid. Until a recycling batch came to a compression station. Until a young woman in gloves that didn't fit right sorted through the material, because it was her job to sort through material, and she picked up something that caught the light differently. He held the 2 lockets together in his palm. The glow from both of them intensified when they touched, not explosively, not dramatically, just more, the way 2 voices sound more when they're singing the same note. He looked at them for a long moment. Then he looked at Lena. In 31 years, he said, no one has entered this memorial node who wasn't a soldier or a maintenance contractor. The sensor array has never failed for any unauthorized civilian entry. The diplomatic seal has never needed to be invoked. He paused. The locket found you. You said that already, Lena said. I wanted to make sure you understood what it means. I don't actually, she said. I still don't understand what it means. He closed his hand around both lockets. Neither do I, he said. Not yet. Part 4. What the soldiers said. I want to take you out of the graveyard for a while and tell you what we said to each other after. Because that's part of the story too, the way ordinary people process extraordinary things, and I think it matters. We were debriefed in groups, and then individually, and the individual sessions were the ones where the investigators were more openly interested, asking questions that circled the same territory from different angles the way investigators do when they're trying to find the inconsistency that reveals the truth. There were no inconsistencies. Our accounts matched because we had all been standing in the same rain looking at the same things. What they kept asking was, did he threaten anyone? No. Did he make any demands beyond requesting access to the tomb? No. Did the civilian appear to be in distress, coerced, or under any non-standard influence? That one was harder to answer. She wasn't distressed, she wasn't coerced. She was, Sergeant Vaughn put it well in her debrief. She seemed like someone who'd been running toward something for a long time and had finally arrived. Not happy exactly, but steady, like the running was over. The investigators wrote down, no apparent coercion or distress. They asked about the locket. We told them what we'd observed, the glow, the way it had intensified when the two were brought together, the sound from the tomb, the preservation field yielding without force. The investigator I spoke to wrote notes for a while and then looked up and said, "Do you have a theory?" I said, "About what?" She said, "About her, the civilian, about why the locket responded to her specifically." I thought about Lena Vasic, her recycling coveralls, her tired eyes, her mud-soaked shoes, the way she had said "I'm sorry" to something ancient and grieving, and meant it simply, without performance, without even thinking about it. "I don't have a theory," I said. That wasn't fully true. But theories were above my pay grade, and I knew better than to say out loud in an official debrief the thing I was actually thinking. What I was actually thinking was this. The locket chose her. He said it. The locket was made from material that responds to affinity, that finds somehow the person who carries the right quality to carry it, not augmentation, not status, not citizenship tier, not any of the things the union uses to measure worth. Something else. And Lena Vasic, who sorted other people's garbage because it was the work available and she needed to eat, who wore gloves that didn't fit right, who had no record of doing anything exceptional in 23 years of ordinary life. Lena Vasic had that quality. Whatever it is. I don't have a word for it. I've tried to find one and settled on different things at different times. Openness. Attention. The specific human capacity to look at 3,000 years of grief standing in the rain and say "I'm sorry" and mean it from somewhere below language, below thought, below the instinct to protect yourself from things you can't categorize. The capacity to be present for something even when the something is enormous and old and has nothing to do with you. She had it. Maybe Sarathas had it too. Maybe that's what it was reading. Maybe that's what affinity means in whatever framework the Velhari built their objects from. I don't know, that's my honest answer, I don't know. Private Comrade told me something else, a few weeks after the incident, when we were on a shared rotation at a different posting and had enough privacy to talk. He said that while we were all watching him hold the two lockets together, while all 12 of us were watching that glow intensify, Rhett had looked at Lena. Just looked at her, not at the lockets, not at him, at her. She was watching him, Rhett said. Not the lockets either, just him, and she had this expression, like when you see something you recognize, not from your life, from, I don't know how to say it, from somewhere deeper. Like she recognized him, I asked. No, Rhett said, he thought about it. Like she recognized the feeling, like she knew what that looked like, someone who'd lost someone, someone who'd been carrying it alone for a long time. He was quiet for a moment. She looked at him like she understood, he said. Not the particulars, just the shape of it. I thought about Lena Vasic for the rest of that shift. I thought about the 4 shifts a week at the compression station, the gloves that didn't fit, the waiting list for a cultivation permit, 11 months long, the way she had brought real flowers to a tomb she'd only seen in dreams. I thought about what it is to understand the shape of loss. Part 5. The thing he asked her. He didn't leave right away. That surprised everyone. There was an expectation, unspoken, but you could feel it settling over the group, that once he had the lockets, once he had what he came for, he would do the thing he had done when he arrived. He would simply cease to be present. He didn't. He stood outside the tomb with the 2 lockets in his closed hand, and he looked at Lena for a while. Not the assessing look from earlier. Something different, more tentative. He said, "The old city is being cleared." "Yeah," Lena said. "The transit grid, they've been at it for months. More demolition batches every week." "There are things there," he said, "that mattered to her, that I didn't know she had kept." Lena waited. "If you found the locket," he said, "you may find other things." "In the batches." She understood what he was asking before he finished asking it. Her face showed it, a quick, slight shift, a recalibration. "You want me to look," she said. "I would not require it," he said immediately. I would not presume to," and here for the first time he stopped himself. Not because he didn't have words. I think he had too many words for 3,000 years worth of wanting and had learned to compress all of them into controlled quiet. He stopped himself because he was asking something he didn't know how to ask without it sounding like an imposition. She carried things with her, into the old city. I didn't know where she went. I've spent 3,000 years not knowing what she left behind. He looked at the tomb, then back at Lena. "You found one thing, perhaps there are others." Lena looked at him for a long time. "I sort 12 hours of recycling material a week," she said. "Most of it's debris and chemical waste and broken construction components. It goes through at high speed. I'd have maybe a second or 2 to catch something if it came through." "I understand. And I might never find anything else. One item in a 3,000-year-old ruin is, the odds of another one coming through my intake bay are probably." "I understand," he said again. She was quiet. "Okay," she said. He looked at her. Why? She thought about it for a real moment, not performing thought but actually thinking. "Because you've been waiting a long time," she said. "And maybe someone should try." Here is the thing about what she said that I have turned over and over in the years since. She didn't say yes because he was ancient or powerful or because she was afraid. She didn't say yes because it was the pragmatic choice or the safe choice or the choice that would advance her standing in any system the Union recognized. She said yes because she meant it. Because it was, to use her word, worth trying. And he looked at her like that was the most complicated thing he'd encountered in 3,000 years. Like he'd forgotten that was the reason people did things. Like he'd been watching civilizations rise and fall for so long that he'd started to think of motivation as strategic and choice as calculated and generosity, as a performance of something else. And here was this young woman in her recycling coveralls telling him she'd keep an eye out, just because someone should. He was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. And he was gone. The way he'd arrived, no transition, no moment you could point to, just gone. The preservation field hummed back into its normal frequencies. The tomb sealed. The rain came down on 12 soldiers and 1 civilian standing in Cemetery Node 7, and nobody said anything for a full 30 seconds. Then Sergeant Vaughn said, in a voice that was doing a remarkable job of staying professional, "Okay. Let's get everyone inside and start the incident reports." Part 6. The Woman and the Work. Lena Vasic was processed through standard civilian incident protocol. She gave her statement. She gave contact information. She was flagged in the Union system as a relevant civilian witness, active file. She was told not to discuss the incident with unauthorized parties. She was released. I thought that would be the end of it. Incidents like this, and there are more incidents like this than the public record suggests, moments where the ordinary and the ancient collide at the edges of the Union's well-lit systems, tend to get processed and filed and made quiet. I thought she'd go back to her compression station and her 4 shifts and her ill-fitting gloves. She did, actually. She went back to all of it. The difference was that she started paying attention differently. I know because I checked. Not obsessively, not inappropriately. I had access to certain reporting systems through my posting, and after the incident at Node 7, I set a low-priority flag on any reports that came through from her sector's recycling operations. It was something to do with my hands during slow rotations. Over the next 4 months, Lena found 3 more items from the demolition batches. The first was a small carved piece that the Union's materials analysis team identified as organic, non-synthetic, pre-compact era, species unknown. It was roughly cylindrical, palm-sized, covered in markings that matched no registered language database. It glowed the same silver blue as the locket. The second was a fragment of something larger, a broken piece of a plate or dish or container, similarly marked. Part of an inscription along one edge that the linguistic analysis team spent 3 weeks on and concluded was probably a proper name. The name was Sarathas. The third was a data substrate, an ancient form of information storage that predated the Union's current systems by at least 2,000 years. The technical team said it was beyond their decryption capacity with current tools. They flagged it for higher-level analysis, and it disappeared into the system the way things do when they go above a certain clearance level. I noted all 3 findings. I noted that each one was found by Lena Vasic, personally, by hand, in the high-speed intake stream of a compression station, where the average item has about 1 to 2 seconds of human visibility before it's compressed or redirected. I noted that the Union's report on each item listed the finder as compression station worker, unaugmented, random discovery. I noted the word random, and I disagreed with it. The 4th item was different. I'm going to tell you about this one carefully, because it's the one I can't fully account for, and I want to be honest about what I saw versus what I concluded. 4 months and 11 days after day 211, I was reassigned temporarily to a different posting, and I lost access to the sector reports. I picked up the thread again about 6 weeks later, when I happened to speak with Corporal Fitch at a command transit hub. She looked like she hadn't slept well. I asked if she'd heard any updates on the Vale, Node 7 situation. She looked at me for a moment, then she said, "Lena found something." I said, "What?" Fitch said, "A journal, old paper, not the synthetic kind, real organic paper, sealed in something that's been keeping it from decomposing. Handwritten. The investigators are trying to translate it. The sections they've managed so far," she stopped. "What?" "She wrote about him," Fitch said. "Sarathas wrote about him. The sections they've translated, it's personal, not political, not historical, just her writing about him, what he was like. What it was like to be with something that old and that sad and that still, somehow, capable of being surprised by things." She paused. "One of the investigators cried during the translation session. She told me. She said the language was, she said you could feel it through the translation, what it was to love something for that long." I thought about him, standing at the tomb, the controlled grief in his face. "Does he know?" I asked. "Does he know the journal was found?" Fitch shook her head. "No way to contact him. He contacts on his own terms." I thought about that. The journal, sitting in a Union evidence archive, full of 3,000-year-old words that were written by someone who loved him, that he didn't know existed. "Someone should tell him," I said. Fitch looked at me. The official position is that all materials recovered from the demolition batches are Galactic Union property under salvage law until species origin can be verified and treaty obligations assessed. That's not what I asked. She was quiet for a moment. No, she said, it's not. Part 7. What Lena wrote. 8 months after day 211, I received, through channels I will decline to specify, a copy of a statement that Lena Vasic had written. Not an official report, not a formal testimony, something she had written on her own without being asked, because she said she felt like the record should contain something that the official record wouldn't. I am including it here, in this archive document, because she asked me to. She gave me the document with very specific instructions. File it where it will be found eventually. Not now necessarily, eventually, when the right person reads it. I have honored that. Here is what she wrote. My name is Lena Vasic. I am 23 years old. I work at Recycling Compression Station 14 in the lower districts of Sector Vale 9. I want to say something about what happened at Cemetery Node 7 on day 211, year 3247. Not the official version, the human version. I had been crying before I got there. I want to be honest about that. I've been crying because 3 days before day 211, I had gone to visit my mother's grave. She died 6 months before, in the lower district medical station, from an illness that would have been treatable if she had been a higher citizenship tier and had access to better care. And I had gone to visit her grave, and I couldn't find it because the lower district grave registry had made an administrative error, and the marker had been placed in the wrong location, and when I tried to correct it, I was told the correction would take 8 to 12 weeks to process. I had been crying about that for 3 days, about the smallness of it, about how even in death there is a hierarchy, and the administrative error happened to a person who was always at the bottom of the hierarchy, and nobody was in a hurry to fix it. I want you to know that when I found the locket in the recycling batch, I almost put it through intake. I almost missed it. I was distracted. I was tired. My hands were cold because the gloves didn't fit right and my fingers were numb in the tips and my reaction time was slow. I caught it because it was warm. Not glowing yet, not in any way I would have noticed. Just warm, in a way that synthetic material isn't warm and compressed recycling debris isn't warm. It was warm the way a hand is warm, the way something is warm when something living has been holding it. I held it and I thought, someone is missing this. I don't know why that was my first thought, but it was. I had the dream that night. The same dream for 3 nights running after that, standing in front of the black stone marker in the rain with the carved moon on the stone. In the dream, I wasn't alone. In the dream, someone was with me. I couldn't see them, but they were there. I know how that sounds. I'm telling it anyway. When I walked into Cemetery Node 7, and I want to be clear that I knew it was restricted, I knew I shouldn't be there. I wasn't acting on good judgment, I was acting on something else that didn't have a name. When I walked in, the first thing I thought was, this is where she went. Not me, her, the person who owned the locket. This is where she went when she went home. I don't know how I knew that. I didn't know who she was. I didn't know anything about Velhari or Diplomatic Seal 7 or pre-compact memorial protocols or any of it. I just knew that the place felt like the end of a journey, and I stood in front of the tomb and I thought, she's here. She came here. And then he was there. I want to say something about him that the official report won't say. He was not frightening. I think I was supposed to be frightened. He was enormous and ancient and not human, and every instinct a person has that responds to power should have been responding. But the thing about him was that none of it, not the height, not the pale skin, not the dark eyes, not the fact of what he was, none of it read as threatening. It read as sad. I have worked in the recycling sector for 4 years. I sort material that people have thrown away. Things that had a purpose once and now have none. Things that were precious to someone once and have come to me because the precious time is over. I spend 40 hours a week with my hands in the discarded evidence of other people's lives. I know what loss looks like when it's been going on long enough to become the shape of a person. He was that. 3,000 years of that. When he asked who I was, I almost laughed, not from disrespect, from the absurdity of the contrast. Who are you, standing at my queen's tomb? And the answer was, nobody. A recycling worker from the lower districts with gloves that don't fit, and an administrative error where my mother's grave marker should be. But I think, and this is what I want the record to contain, I think that maybe the locket didn't care about any of that. I think the locket was looking for something that doesn't have a citizenship tier. I don't know what it found in me. I am honestly not sure I'm worth what it seemed to think I was worth. But I told him I would look, and I have looked, and I will keep looking. Because someone should. And because she loved him, apparently, for a long time, in a way that left enough of a mark on a place that the place still remembers it. And I think things like that shouldn't stay lost. My name is Lena Vasic. I am 23 years old. I sort other people's discarded things for a living. And I think that is exactly the right job for this. Part 8. What comes after? I am going to tell you the ending of this story as I currently know it, with the acknowledgement that stories of this kind don't really end. The journal was eventually returned. I don't know the full chain of events that led to this outcome. I know that Lena Vasic filed a formal petition under Treaty Protocol 14's cultural property provisions, arguing that the journal's origin clearly predated Union salvage law applicability, and that its content, which the partially completed translation confirmed, was personal correspondence of a classified pre-compact entity, fell under the same diplomatic protections as Cemetery Node 7 itself. The petition took 4 months. It was approved. The journal was transferred from the Union Evidence Archive to the memorial site, to be held in the care of the site's recognized permanent guardian. I know all of this because the transfer order came through administrative channels that crossed my desk. And I know what I'm about to tell you because Fitch was assigned to the transfer protocol, and she told me afterward. He came when the journal was placed at the tomb. She didn't see him arrive. Nobody ever did. He was just there suddenly, the way he had been there in the rain on day 211, standing with the journal in his hands. Fitch said he stood there for a long time without opening it. She said it was the kind of stillness that you don't interrupt. The kind that has its own weight, its own right to the space it takes. He opened it eventually. She couldn't see his face from where she was standing. She said she was glad of that. She said she didn't think she was meant to see his face in that moment. She said he read for a very long time. And then he closed it, and he looked up. And Lena Vasic was standing at the edge of the perimeter in her gray coveralls, with an expression that Fitch described as, not happy, not sad, just present. He looked at her. She said, I thought you should have it. He said after a moment, she wrote about you. Which was, Fitch told me, she had to replay that in her head twice. Lena blinked. That's not, she's been dead for 3,000 years. She wrote about someone, he said. At the end, someone she hadn't met yet but felt was coming. She wrote, I think there will be one someday who finds what we leave behind and treats it as what it was. She wrote, I hope she is kind. Lena stood very still. She said. She wrote he confirmed. The rain had come back, the way it always seems to come back in Sector Vale 9, low and steady and without drama. Lena looked at the tomb. I'm sorry I can't find more, she said. The demolition batches from the old city are almost finished. The grid construction is nearly done, whatever was left there. You found more than I had, he said. For 3,000 years I had nothing. Now I have 4 things and the journal." He paused. "And the knowledge of where she went," he said, at the end. "That she went home." He was quiet for a moment. "That matters," he said. "That is not a small thing." Lena nodded. She looked down at her feet, the same muddy shoes, Fitch noted, the same kind they'd been on day 211. Old boots worn through at the sole. "I'm going to put in for a cultivation permit," Lena said. "When it comes through, the list is 11 months. I want to grow something. Real flowers to put here." She gestured at the tomb. "Every now and then, if you think she would have." "Yes," he said, before she finished. "She would have liked that." Lena nodded. She looked at the tomb one more time, then she looked at him. "I'm sorry I couldn't find her for you," she said. "I'm sorry she's gone." He looked at her for a long time with those dark eyes, and that face that carried 30 centuries of a particular kind of mourning that never gets easier. "You found the locket," he said. "You found the journal. You found 4 things in the wreckage of a civilization. You brought her home to the place where we were happy." He paused. "You did not fail to find her." Lena wiped her face with the back of her wrist. Fitch noted she was crying again. The same quiet kind, not dramatic, not performed, just present. "I should get back to work," Lena said. He nodded. She turned to go. She got about 4 steps. "Lena Vasic," he said. She stopped. "The cultivation permit list," he said. "The 11-month waiting list." She turned back. He was watching her with something different in his face, not the controlled grief, not the assessing attention from before. Something that, on a human face, would have read as the early edge of something careful. "I have treaty-level recognized status as a pre-compact entity under Protocol 14, he said. "Cultivation permits can be sponsored under cultural preservation provisions. It circumvents the standard tier-based waiting list." She stared at him. "For any species or associated personnel involved in memorial site maintenance and cultural artifact recovery," he said. "Which you are." She kept staring. "If you would accept the sponsorship," he said. Lena Vasic stood in the rain of Cemetery Node 7 in her gray coveralls, and her worn-through boots and her gloves that had never fit right, and looked at a 3,000-year-old Velhari entity who had just offered to cut the bureaucratic waiting list for her cultivation permit, so she could grow flowers for his dead queen's grave. "Yes," she said, "I accept." He nodded. She nodded. And then she went back to work.